patrolman told Tom that several people had called in and told them how reckless Tom was driving through the mountains and he had better stop. When the patrolman walked away, Tom turned to Edith. "Take the wheel." He was afraid that the patrolman would arrest him as soon as he pulled off. And as Edith took the wheel, her nerves were still on edge. She drove through the town. At the edge of town, Tom mumbled, I'm going to get out." He opened the door. Hurriedly, Edith slowed the car to a stop. Tom passed out and fell out on the ground.
Oh, wow.
If the patrolman had not stopped them, Tom would have been driving in the mountains when he passed out. Edith was in awe as she realized how close to death they had come. God's hand of protection had covered them. They safely made it to the Army post in Washington State. While they were living there, Johnny, their 6-month-old baby, got sick. When the congestion went into his chest, it turned into bronchitis. Edith and Tom took him to the hospital. "Your baby is very sick," the doctor said, his face wrinkled in concern. "I'm afraid we're going to have to put him in the isolation ward." Edith's mind spun. This meant that they would not be allowed to visit their baby. "You can call every day to see how he is," a nurse told them. Edith went home discouraged. It seemed like her arms were empty. After a week, one morning, the hospital called. "If you want to see your baby, you should come at once. He has gotten diarrhea, and we do not expect him to live." Edith and Tom jumped in the car and raced to the hospital. When they entered the room, they were shocked. Their little baby lay on the bed with glazed-over eyes. A tube was in his nose, and needles were in his legs. Edith glanced over at Tom. He looked just as frightened as she felt. Their baby was dying, and there was nothing they could do for him. On the way home, Tom said, "Edith, I'm going to call Grandma Wade and the Saints in Cherryville, Kansas, and have them pray for the baby." Tom was a drunk, but he had seen the power of prayer when the Christians prayed. The next morning, Edith called the hospital. "How's my baby?" she asked. Cheerfully, they told her, "We've removed the tube that was in his nose and the needles from his legs." Edith began to cry, "Thank the Lord." The next morning, the nurse called and said, "We can't understand the change in this baby. Come get him. There is not anything wrong with him." The nurses and doctors were amazed at the quick change in baby Johnny. Tom and Edith let them know that God had answered prayer. Even though Tom witnessed the power of God and how he had healed his baby, he still did not turn his heart to him. He continued on his own path, drinking, gambling, and threatening to kill his family. Then he would sober up and be so sorry for what he had done. Then he would go back out and drink. It was a vicious cycle. When Sunday would come, Edith would make sure the children were dressed for church, and the family would load up in the car for the 22-mile trip to church. The children and Edith would go to church while Tom went to the bar on the next corner. Then after church, he would drive them home. It was a pretty wild drive. One particular night before they left the house, Edith felt a strong urge to pray. She slipped into the closet and prayed that God would protect them. She did not have a lot of time, so she just breathed a quick prayer. While traveling down one of those mountains, abruptly a tire blew out. Boom! Immediately the Lord just set that car down so easily on the side of the road. Then Edith knew why she had the warning. She determined to listen closely to God. On one occasion, Tom's cousin, Donald Wade, came to Washington to visit the family. Donald and Tom were out drinking, so Edith got all the children in bed. She was lying in bed when she heard the men come in. They were drunk and arguing about the Bible. Tom came into the bedroom. "Edith, get up," he yelled. "Come in here and read the Bible to us." Edith jumped out of bed and fumbled with her housecoat. She went to the chair and read the Bible. After a while, Tom slurred, "All right, now we'll all have prayer." Edith caught her breath. Now she was in trouble. She knew the two drunken men were not going to be doing much praying, and that it was all up to her. "I've never been able to pray nice or pretty prayers," she thought. As Edith went to her knees, in her heart she prayed a very simple prayer. "Lord, if you ever helped me, help me now." She knew if she stumbled through this prayer, she was in bad trouble. Instantly, God was there. How the Lord helped her pray. She prayed on, and the two men were unusually quiet. It seemed to Edith that the prayer lasted a long time. When she had finished, without a word, they all went to bed. Usually Tom would lie there and threaten what he was going to do to Edith. Not that night. It was very different. The Lord once again had spoken, "Peace be still." As the children grew, they had examples of both a praying mother and a sinful father. They watched as God answered prayer and helped their mother, and they watched as their father's sin brought misery to the whole family. Tom had started choosing sin when he was young. By the time he was 13, he was already smoking and stealing things.
Oh my.
He would hang around older boys who led him deeper and deeper in sin. When he was 18, he and a friend got drunk and robbed a liquor store. He spent the next 4 years in prison, going from bad to worse. He had not intended to be the kind of father that his children were afraid of. When he was a 13-year-old boy, he had not thought, "I want to grow up and hurt my family. I want to be in and out of county jails. I want to wreck my life." But this is where the devil had led him. He was a drunk, gambler, and drug addict. When Christmas came, Tom had bought the boys a train set and set it up. He had been drinking all day. When he came in, he was mad and gave everyone a terrible time. Edith tried to protect the children. That made Tom furious. "How dare you!" he screamed. "Carol," he called to the 8-year-old girl, "go in the kitchen and get me a knife. I'm going to kill your mom." Carol ran to the kitchen to obey. Her breathing was in big gasps. "Kill my mom?" she thought. "No, I can't give you a knife." Carol's hands were shaking. She looked for all their knives and started hiding them. "Carol," Tom yelled. She came back out of the kitchen. "I can't find any knives," she told her dad. Tom stomped past her and came back, a sharp knife in his hand.
Okay, Nancy.